For 10 summers, my Jewish self thrived at summer camp. There are Jewish values woven into every activity, and marking Jewish time was baked into the experience. While the URJ Green Family Camp in Bruceville, Texas was my home for most of those summers, I've always been surprised at how there are certain similarities regardless of region or specialty. For 10 summers, 3 times a day, we would gather for meals that would begin and end in blessing. Many of us are likely familiar with the motzi, our blessing over bread that serves as an overall moment of gratitude before we eat. And after 10 summers, 3 times a day, I also became intimately familiar with the Birkat Hamazon, our blessing after the meal. This practice to bookend our meals with blessing is grounded in a verse from this week's Torah portion, Akev. Moses continues his impassioned speech to the Israelites on the precipice of entering the Promised Land without him. Every few lines, Moses says, "Don't forget to do this and don't forget to do that." It's the equivalent of sending your child off to college with all the expectations and independence, none of the supervision, and the parting plea, "Don't forget to call your mother." Mother in this case is God. Moses wants to set the people up for success in this new land and is hopeful they will remember and observe all the commandments laid before them in the wilderness. And Moses knows his people. They have a history of kvetching and complaining at every turn. Surely this generation is a little better than the last one in that respect, but offering gratitude and positivity isn't necessarily their go-to. They complained in particular about food, both in the fear that there wouldn't be any and in missing the variety they had in Egypt. But now Moses assures them that they are entering a land blooming with possibility and sustenance. He says, God is bringing you into a good land, a land where you may eat to your heart's content, where you will lack for nothing. And then he says, Ve'achalta v'savata uverachta et Adonai Elohecha al ha'aretz hatova asher natan lach, which you may recognize in the Birkat Hamazon as Kakatu ve'alchata v'savata uverachta et Adonai Elohecha al ha'aretz hatova asher natan lach baruch ata Adonai al ha'aretz ve'al hamazon, which means, when you have eaten your fill, give thanks to Adonai your God for the good land given to you. The rabbis of the Talmud take this verse from Torah and turn it into the Birkat Hamazon. They reasoned that without this act of blessing, one engages in theft, that whoever eats and enjoys fruits from God's world without pronouncing a prayer of gratitude steals from God. The rabbis dive even deeper into a discussion over the format and theological nature of these blessings, including what happens when someone goes off book and pronounces their gratitude in a different way. They tell the story of Benjamin the shepherd, who, after eating his sandwich, said, Brich rachamana malka de alma mare de hai pita. Blessed is the merciful one, ruler of the world, creator of this bread. Not only does he say his own blessing of gratitude, he does so in Aramaic, the vernacular of the time. This Brich Rachamana one-liner is often referred to as the minimum one may recite if they are strapped for time. The example the Talmud gives is that if one were being pursued by robbers on the highway and don't have time to pray the whole grace after meals, Birkat Hamazon, Brich Rachamana would suffice. I'm guessing that experience is a rare occurrence for most of us, being caught with robbers on the highway, but it's not such a stretch to talk about eating on the go or being distracted during a meal. Since March, I have had a shift in my thinking around gratitude for food. It's not that I have taken food for granted. I have certainly blessed my fair share of meals, but 3 things happened all at once when we began to stay at home. the first two kind of go hand in hand. As a member of the leadership team for the HUC Soup Kitchen in New York, I had the heartbreaking responsibility to close our doors and pause our meal service, our weekly meal service, for the first time in over 30 years. Our last day in March, we filled the bags with as much food and socks and toiletries that we could possibly fit, and sadly told our guests that we didn't know what the future would hold and when we would be able to reopen. At the same time, Alex and I were preparing to ready ourselves for an unknown duration of staying at home. We went to our local Costco in New York, and the line was out the door, around the block. The gate of entry was closed so that they could control the crowd. We then turned to Target next door, and while we were able to get some supplies, it was slim pickings, with much of the produce and protein shelves being empty. I can honestly say that it was the first time in my life that I was uncertain about our access to food. And finally, as we settled in, we found ourselves doing a lot more cooking. All of a sudden, we were preparing every single meal together at home. There was no takeout or coffee runs or free bagels at school. And while I certainly love to cook and bake, it gave me a much greater sense of appreciation for the food we had and the sustenance it provided. Brene Brown suggests that it's not joy that makes us grateful, but rather it's a practice of gratitude that invites that joy into our lives. She goes on to talk about gratitude as a practice, not just about the attitude of gratitude, but as an active, embodied way of being. We practice because we aren't always going to remember or even get it right, but it doesn't mean that we should just give up. If we have a strong sense or practice of gratitude when things are good and we are satisfied, it would serve us all the more so when we are hungry or in need. As Benjamin the shepherd teaches us with his one-line blessing of Brich Rachamana, our gratitude for food can be in whatever language we need it to be and with whatever words feel right. We can also show our gratitude for sustenance with action. The NSCI community will be collecting goods for the Ark between September 13th and October 9th. There will be a bin in the north parking lot, so stay tuned for more information on that. And I was delighted to learn that NSCI has a mitzvah garden, which I saw yesterday. It's in full bloom, and I learned that the produce from that garden is split between the Ark and the Moraine Township Food Pantry. It is really special to be a part of a community that prioritizes this practice of gratitude in sharing sustenance with others. Even in this time of uncertainty, there is much to be grateful for. Our gratitude calls us to awareness, to action, and to blessing. May we find our way in this practice of gratitude together. Shabbat Shalom.